Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll go first, and then Farhan and the guests. All right. I'd like to start off with a travel announcement. The President of the General Assembly, Abdullah Shahid, heads to the Pacific tomorrow. He will be attending the Ocean Conference in Koror, Palau on 13th and 14th April. This is the preparatory conference to the Ocean Conference in Lisbon that will be held this summer, and you'll have a detailed press release coming shortly. Today, the President of the General Assembly is meeting with the President of ECOSOC, Colin Vixen Kellepel. These talks are done on a regular basis in line with President Shahid's efforts to revitalize the work of the General Assembly. And this afternoon, President Shahid will be meeting with Columbia University's School of International and Public Affairs, or SIPA. He will speak on the topic of youth and multilateralism. As you know, engagement with young people is one of the priorities of the Presidency of Hope. That's everything I have for you today. Any questions for me? Sure, Ray.
Thank you, Paulina. Today there has been news that the U.S. is moving to ask the suspension of Russia from the UN Human Rights Council. Did you, through the UNGA, did you get any requests regarding that? Thank you.
No, there's no request. No. Any other questions for me? Yeah, Evelyn.
Yes, Paulina, do you have any more news on when the UN may open up to outside visitors?
I don't have any date to announce, Evelyn.
Yeah. You know why I'm asking, so please let me know.
I will. Thank you. Kristen.
If there were to be such a request, would that just be the normal 24-hour scheduling period for something like that to happen, and it would just be called and put to a vote?
Yeah, exactly. So per resolution, and I have it right here, 60-251, as you know, the General Assembly, by a 2/3 majority of the members present and voting, may suspend the rights of membership in the Council. And for the resolution, as you stated, it's just the translations on the night before. Yeah, Pam.
So has the PGA weighed in on the war crimes question, whether he thinks there should be an investigation, anything on the war crimes issue from the ICC point of view, from the Ukrainian prosecutor's point of view, or from the current proposal for a GA resolution to boot Russia from the Human Rights Council? Anything?
No, I mean, the President of the General Assembly believes it's up to member states, and he gives them the freedom.
And no comments on...
You mean specifically about a specific aspect, or just generally?
About human rights abuses or war crimes in Ukraine.
No, I mean, if you're referring to any resolutions or things like that, it's really up to member states.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, John.
Is the same 2/3 rule apply to any resolution seeking suspension of a member state from the General Assembly?
Yes, it's 2/3 of those present and voting.
And what would initiate, what is the mechanism for initiating such a request? Does it have to be a formal request to the President of the General Assembly? What is the mechanism?
Well, the resolution would go to the Secretariat, as they all do. They're all submitted to the Secretariat themselves, and then the President of the General Assembly is asked for a meeting. And so we have not had any request for a meeting. Sure, Stefano.
Thank you, Paulina. Did the President of the General Assembly ask to talk to the mission, to the ambassador, the Russian ambassador, to ask any, because Russia's been saying that this is manipulation of news by Ukraine, of things like this. Did he approach to find out more what they mean with that? Is he trying to find out more of what's happening? And I understand that he's just waiting for the member state to decide, but is he curious about that?
You know, the door to the President of the General Assembly is always open for member states. And so he's in regular contact with all member states. And I'll leave it at that. I think that answers your question.
Just a quick follow-up. Is in the power of the President of the General Assembly to actually, ask for a meeting, something like this, or he has to always be on the waiting part, like, if somebody wants to visit him, that's fine. But will he be able to, let's say, call the ambassador, the Russian ambassador, and tell him, can you come in my office, explain what you mean when you say that or that?
As I said, the President of the General Assembly, his door is open, and he has regular contact with all members of the General Assembly. Any other questions for me? All right. Thanks very much.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. In a short while, we will be joined here by our guests who will brief on the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. They will be UN Mine Action Service Acting Director Eileen Cohn, Special Envoy for Universalization of the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention, and Lord Chamberlain of the Royal Hashemite Court, His Royal Highness Prince Mered of Jordan, the Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations, Ambassador Guillermo Fernandez de Soto, Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations, Ambassador David Howdy, Director of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, Hector Guerra, and IED survivor and photographer Giles Dooley. And at 1 p.m., there will be a hybrid briefing by Ambassador Barbara Woodward, Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations and President of the Security Council for the month of April. She will brief you on the program of work for the month. Regarding today's guests, today is the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. In a few minutes, you will hear much more on this topic from our guests. In his message to mark the day, the Secretary General reminded us how far we have come in clearing the world of explosive remnants of war. Today, he said, more than 160 states have signed the Mine Ban Convention, and landmines have become almost universally unacceptable. But the world is still rife with millions of stockpile landmines, and over 50 countries remain contaminated with these weapons. In Ukraine, for example, the Secretary General said the legacy of a single month of war will take decades to tackle, threatening lives long after the guns fall silent. Mine action is an investment in humanity, Mr. Guterres said. It is a prerequisite for humanitarian relief efforts and the foundation of lasting peace and sustainable development. A few moments ago, the Secretary General spoke in a video message to the press conference to launch the third report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He said that the report is a litany of broken promises and a file of shame, cataloging the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. This is a climate emergency, he said, but high-emitting governments and corporations are not just turning a blind eye. They're adding fuel to the flames. He added that climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are the countries that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. He called on countries to triple the speed of the shift to renewable energy and end the funding of coal, not just abroad, but at home. Climate promises and plans must be turned into reality and action now, he said. On Ukraine, you will have seen the Secretary General's statement issued yesterday in which he said he is deeply shocked by the images of civilians killed in Bucha. It is essential that an independent investigation leads to effective accountability, he stressed. The humanitarian coordinator, Osnot Lubrani, also expressed devastation over the images of people who have been killed and subjected to horrific violence in Bucha, as well as in Irpin, Hostomel, and other parts of Ukraine. She said that the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine is trying to visit these locations without delay, adding that the UN in the country is also closely monitoring attacks on schools, hospitals, and other civilian infrastructure. The UN and our humanitarian partners reiterate our call on all parties to the conflict to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law and protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. As of March 31st, UN agencies and our partners have reached more than 1.4 million people with critical multisectoral assistance. Before the latest developments and since February 24th, the UN Human Rights Commission had already recorded over 3,520 civilian casualties in Ukraine, including approximately 1,430 people killed, more than 120 of them children. The real numbers are probably much higher, as reports received from some locations where intense hostilities have taken place are yet to be verified. And on humanitarian funding, we have received nearly $20 million more in the last few days. So far, just over half of the $1.1 billion requested in the humanitarian flash appeal has been made available. And I know several of you have asked for an update on the work of the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths. He is in Moscow. We had several high-level meetings today with Russian government officials, including Foreign Minister Lavrov, Deputy Foreign Minister Vershinin, and Defense Minister Shoigu. Mr. Griffiths' meetings are taking place to explore the possible agreements and arrangements for humanitarian ceasefire in Ukraine with parties to the conflict, as instructed by the Secretary General. The visit serves a humanitarian purpose of protecting civilians in the conflict and ensuring they have access to relief. Tomorrow, Mr. Griffiths will brief the Security Council on Ukraine, together with the Secretary General and the Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo. Mr. Griffiths then hopes to travel to Ukraine. He remains in constant contact with authorities in Kyiv. On Saturday, the Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, marked the start of the 2-month truce reached in Yemen. He stressed the importance of building on the agreement to restore some trust between the warring parties and resume a political process aimed at ending the conflict. The terms of the 2-month truce include facilitating the entry of 18 fuel ships into the port of Hodeidah and allowing 2 commercial flights a week to and from Sana'a Airport. The terms also include convening a meeting between the parties to agree on opening roads in Taiz and elsewhere to improve civilians' freedom of movement inside Yemen. In remarks to the press late Friday, the Secretary General urged the parties to build on this opportunity by cooperating in good faith and without preconditions with Special Envoy Grunberg in his efforts to resume an inclusive and comprehensive Yemeni political process. The ultimate aim, the Secretary General said, must be a negotiated political settlement which addresses the legitimate concerns and aspirations of all Yemenis. On South Sudan, the UN peacekeeping mission there welcomes yesterday's decision by signatories to the revitalized peace agreement to unify the command structures of the security forces. The mission says that this is a significant and overdue move towards achieving outstanding benchmarks in the peace deal, and hopes this will help unblock other impediments so that free and fair elections can be held on time. While much remains to be done, the UN mission commends this positive step forward towards securing sustainable peace for all South Sudanese people. Turning to Mali, the UN peacekeeping mission in the country, MINUSMA, has launched an investigation following reports that civilians were killed during clashes last week between the Malian armed forces and militants in Moura. This is about 400 kilometers northeast of Bamako. Our peacekeeping colleagues are very concerned about these reports, and they are working to verify the facts and circumstances of the incident, including whether human rights violations and abuses were committed. Preparations are underway for a fact-finding mission to travel to the area, and MINUSMA is already engaging directly with the Malian authorities. Our UN team in Sri Lanka, led by the UN resident coordinator, Hana Singer Hamdi, is closely following the situation in the country following increasing periods of rolling power cuts, fuel shortages, and worsening inflation and currency devaluation. The resident coordinator said that the rights to peaceful assembly, association, and expression are universal fundamental rights which help foster dialogue between citizens and the state. On Friday, she also called for restraint from all groups and for the de-escalation of tensions concerned with reports of violence. Our UN team encourages all citizens to engage in dialogue for peaceful solutions. In Sierra Leone, our team, led by resident coordinator Babatunde Ohonsi, continues supporting authorities to respond to COVID-19. To date, the country has received nearly 3 million doses of vaccines via COVAX, with over 1.7 million people having received at least one dose. Despite the pandemic's impact on education, with the UN team's support, there was a 36% increase in children enrolled in basic and secondary education from 2020 to 2021, with 2 million children receiving their regular vaccines. Our team also supported a new scheme to boost food production in schools, now piloted in 17 schools. And over 14,000 children can now access water and sanitation facilities in schools. An additional 100,000 people have access to basic water supply. Our team also contributed to improved access to renewable energy, building over 80 mini-grids in rural areas benefiting nearly 300,000 people. In addition, 123,000 crisis-affected persons benefited from food and cash transfers, while 2,000 women who survived violence received quality attention and care, and 16,000 girls received access to health and protection services. I'd been asked over the weekend, and I can say that we take note of the settlement reached between the government of the Kyrgyz Republic and Centerra Gold Incorporated over the Kumtor gold mine. And last, we have further good news on the financial contributions front. We got full payments to the regular budget from Nicaragua and Turkey. This takes us up to 83 paid-up member states. And with that, before we go to our guests, I'll take your questions. Edie and then Joe.
Thank you very much, Farhan. First, a follow-up on Undersecretary General Griffiths' trip to Moscow. You told us who he met with. Can we get any kind of a readout on what happened at the meetings, whether he made any kind of progress toward a humanitarian ceasefire?
Yeah. Well, actually, you'll be fortunate enough to be able to get a readout, as it were, from Mr. Griffiths himself by tomorrow, because he will be briefing the Security Council. He and the Secretary General intend to speak at a meeting that's scheduled for tomorrow.
Yes, I know, but they met today.
Yeah, and they met today. He is, at this point, going to be sharing with the Secretary General his impressions of these meetings. At this point, the basic idea is that he's trying to do what he can to get a humanitarian pause in hostilities. We don't have anything to announce because, of course, he has to speak with both of the parties, with the Russian side and with the Ukrainian side. And he does intend to travel to Kiev, to Ukraine, and he is in contact regularly with authorities there as well. And so he'll be in discussions with them, as well as with the Secretary General, about the talks he's had. As far as I'm aware, today's discussions were productive, but I don't have any details to share.
Okay.
And one more for you.
One more for me.
Yeah.
On the Yemen truce and the agreement to let 18 fuel ships in and 2 flights, have any of those fuel ships been able to dock? I know some of them have been in the waters right near there for quite a long time.
As far as I'm aware, yes, the ships are on the move. We'll have to see in the coming days. It seems since the truce took effect on Saturday evening that matters are largely holding, and we do expect that shipments will be on the move. Yes, Joe.
Yes, I take note of what you said in terms of the Secretary General's call for an independent investigation of the atrocities that occurred in Bucha and elsewhere in Ukraine. However, from all reports, Bucha was a peaceful city before the Russian military occupied it. Following the withdrawal of the Russian military, as we've all seen, the images, the bodies strewn on the streets and other evidence of atrocities left in the wake of the Russians' occupation. Does the Secretary General have any doubt that Russia is the source of these, the Russian military is the source of these atrocities? And if so, if he has concluded that Russia is at least most likely responsible for these atrocities, is he now willing to, as President Biden has done, call for an investigation of war crimes by President Putin?
For all atrocities, wherever they occur, our point of principle is that there needs to be a full and thorough investigation. As you saw, the Secretary General expressed his horror about what we have seen, and he has called immediately for such investigation. It's not a question of doubting one side or doubting what the visual evidence we have at hand is, but we do believe, as always, that these need to be thoroughly investigated, and we will make our evaluations based on the results of what those investigations entail.
Why is he not prepared to go as far as many world leaders, including President Biden, and acknowledge the acknowledge the elephant in the room, that Russia is, by all accounts, largely responsible for these atrocities in Ukraine, including the ones in the images we've seen in Bucha? I mean, why can't he take that additional step as the moral conscience of the United Nations?
Speaking as the moral conscience of the United Nations, the Secretary General has said some very strong things, including about Russia's actions. And I would just turn you over to look at what he said in the past weeks. They're very clear. They're very strong. At the same time, like I said, we as an organization believe in waiting for the evidence to be thoroughly investigated, and we do that as a point of principle. It's not a question of doubting any side. It's that we need to make sure that the facts verify what the visual evidence seems to show. Evelyn.
Yes, thank you, Farhan. To follow up on Joe's question, what kind of investigation? How is that happening? Do you have any more details? Who's investigating for?
Well, at this stage, as you know, these are crimes that have occurred on the soil of Ukraine, so it's completely within the rights of the Ukrainian authorities to investigate on their own. At the same time, as you know, there are UN bodies such as our own human rights monitoring. And as I just said, our human rights monitoring mission is trying to gather details as they can and trying to get access to the key areas, including Bucha. And as you know, there are many judicial bodies, independent judicial bodies like the International Criminal Court, and we will leave it to them to determine their own course of action.
Any timeline of when you expect a result?
Well, as I said at the top of this briefing, our monitoring teams are trying to get there as soon as they can. Kristen and then Philippe.
Excuse me. Thanks, Farhan. Last week, Stefan was asked about whether or not the Secretary General supported removing Russia from the Human Rights Council, and he suggested that, in principle, he didn't think it was a good idea. And I'm wondering, I know he's spoken very strongly about the situation in Bucha. Does that change that assessment at all?
I think from our standpoint, the basic point to make is matters such as this are in the hands of the member states, and we will leave it to the member states to decide. What the worry has been on this side is the precedent being set about this action, but ultimately, like I said, we respect the right of the member states to take action and to respond to matters on the ground. Yes, Phil.
Could you elaborate on what you mean by the precedent that it sets, and how that might be difficult going forward if when one country is particularly a P5 member is?
I think I will leave it at what I've just said. Yes, Philippe.
Thank you, Farhan. I have a question on Mali and another massacre, apparently between 200 and 400 people killed in Moura recently. Apparently also Blue Helmet were maybe 40 kilometers from this massacre by the Malian forces, helped with mercenary. Can you tell us what UN did and what UN does? Did you open an investigation on this massacre?
Well, as I said just earlier at the start of this briefing, our peacekeeping colleagues are very concerned about the reports of the killings in Moura. They're working to verify the facts and circumstances of the incident, including whether human rights violations and abuses were committed. And there are preparations underway for a fact-finding mission to travel to the area and MINUSMA is also engaging directly with the Malian authorities. And it's important that a thorough investigation is carried out to determine the facts, and that this process is, of course, as I've just said, now underway. Pam.
Thank you, Farhan. On the Martin Griffiths briefing tomorrow, I assume at the 10 a.m. Security Council meeting, where will he be? He will have finished his mission to Moscow, but still be in Russia and heading for Kyiv?
I believe by tomorrow he will be speaking to the Security Council by VTC from Geneva.
From Geneva, and then he goes to Kyiv.
Yes, so we'll let you know about when he gets to go to Kiev. He's arranging that, and like I said, he's in touch with authorities. We'll report to you when he can travel, but tomorrow he should be,
right.
as I've mentioned, in Geneva.
And a follow up on the UN's human rights monitoring mission in Ukraine. Where have they gone, and have they picked up any evidence, and can we see any report from them on what they've done? We've seen ICC and the Ukrainian prosecutor to some extent, but we haven't seen what they've been able to achieve on the human rights, because they were evacuated, I thought, from some towns. Thank you.
Well, they've been on the move, as Osnat Lubrani said this morning, and I would refer you to her fuller statement. They are, at this stage, trying to gain access to a number of sites, and that includes Bucha, Irpin, and Hostomel, and at the same time they have been monitoring attacks on schools, on hospitals, and other infrastructure. A lot of their data has been shared with you in our periodic updates, but you'll also get more information in the briefings tomorrow to the Security Council. Okay, Benny Avni, you have a question?
Yes, I do. What do you mean by precedent? In 2011, Libya was suspended from the Human Rights Council, so that was a precedent. What do you mean by precedent?
Like I said to Kristen, I'll leave it at that. Obviously, it's up to the members of the General Assembly to determine actions as they will. The question is about the precedent that may be set, and I think the member states know what we mean when we say that. Anyway,
I don't understand what you mean by you will leave it at that. You're saying something that is untrue. You're saying that this would be a precedent. It is not.
I think you and I both know what the difference is. And
no,
with that,
I don't. Explain.
No, I'm sure you do. Yes, Kristen.
I don't think I missed this. If I did, pardon me, but did you have an update on Mariupol and supplies getting into Mariupol? I know that as of Friday, I believe the UN was still working on that.
As far as I know, we are still working on that. I'm not aware. I didn't have any update to provide to you of things getting into Mariupol. Once we can verify what amounts of things have gone in, we'll provide that update. And with that, I'm going to turn over to our guests. 1 second, please. Bear with me. So, we're very pleased to have with us our guests to mark the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. They include, and I would ask our guests to raise their hands when I call on them so you know which ones are where, because some are in the front rows and some are at the table. But we have with us today the Acting Director of the UN Mine Action Service, HAYLI.AM, the Special Envoy for the Universalization of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, and Lord Chamberlain of the Royal Hashemite Court, His Royal Highness Prince Mered of Jordan, the Permanent Representative of Colombia to the United Nations, Ambassador Guillermo Fernandez de Soto, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations, Ambassador David Howdy, the Director of the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, Hector Guerra, and IED survivor and photographer Giles Dooley. I believe I will now briefly vacate this podium so that Prince Mered can speak to you from here, and then the other speakers will give their opening remarks in order before we turn to your questions. Prince Mered, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to the United Nations Mine Action Service en masse for the opportunity to join you all in this International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action. As a special envoy for the universalization of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, my job has been to promote the universal imperative against the use of this weapon and promote adherence to the treaty's norms. In general, states parties to the convention have done a good job in the past 25 years. More than 53 million stockpiled anti-personnel mines have been destroyed. Contaminated land in mine-affected communities continue to be cleared for their productive use. The rights and needs of mine victims are somewhat addressed, although there is still much to do to ensure that we provide this assistance, not as a matter of charity, but as part of wider frameworks in line with the CRPD. All in all, a tremendous benefit has been derived from the convention. States parties continue to show solidarity to one another by providing assistance and promoting cooperation. This is true not only from donors towards affected countries, but through so-called South-South cooperation and innovative triangular approaches where one donor country provides the means for mine-affected countries themselves to exchange experiences. This is a well-oiled, functioning humanitarian disarmament treaty with 80% of the world proudly calling themselves states parties. Now we have to focus on the remaining 20%. In a moment of growing conflicts around the world, we have to focus on the imperative against these weapons. There are 33 countries that have not joined. Among them, some that may be holding collectively tens of millions of anti-personnel mines in their military warehouses and millions more that they have unfortunately buried in the ground. A coordinated and concerted effort is needed at the highest level in order to achieve further accessions. This will not be easy, but is possible. Among the states that are not party to the convention, there are some states that have the power to significantly turn the tide and eliminate this horrendous weapon, such as China, India, Pakistan, Russia, and the United States. Most of these states attend convention meetings and provide updates on their landmine policy. We encourage their continued participation in the work of the convention. Cooperation and assistance continues to be a key factor in our implementation efforts. According to the Landmine Monitor, in 2020, 33 donors contributed a total of $565 million in international support for mine action across 40 affected countries. Of these, 26 were states parties to the treaty, while other top donors were the European Union and 4 other institutions. Two, however, were states not party, the United States and the Republic of Korea. I'm glad to report that both countries are actively participating in convention meetings and have expressed acceptance of the convention's norms and humanitarian objectives. This is perhaps as good an opportunity as any to call on these two states and to all states not yet partied, but that are on board with the aims of the convention to take their commitment another step further. While we hear their concerns for not joining, we see that they are, for the most part, observing many or most, if not all, of the convention's norms. The United States, which is the world's second largest mine action donor, and which provided a lot of support to our national program in my country, in Jordan, I would encourage it to reinstate its 2014 landmine policy, which was reversed in 2020. This would once again put the United States in a leadership position on this matter. As I mentioned, this call for action is not just for the United States, but for all other countries which have not yet joined, but are de facto parties. I call on the Marshall Islands, Nepal, Tonga, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, Vietnam, Laos, PDR, Lebanon, and others that have a lot more in common with states parties than those not state parties. Why you could ask, would their joining be of importance if they do not possess or plan on using mines? Because it strengthens the norm against landmines. It strengthens and reiterates the fact that the casualties caused by these weapons, of which a large number are children, are simply not acceptable. All countries have a role to play. A small Pacific island nation to the world's greatest military powers. We are concerned by the alleged use of anti-personnel mines in one state not party, and by one state not party deploying mines within a state party, the Ukraine. The convention's president, following her mandate, will speak more on that. But allow me to say that that any use of